So I know that this subject has already been talked about quite a bit, and at the same time, it's also still just in the beginning stages. We're faced with this situation where this topic has been sort of continually beaten, and then at the same time, we still don't actually have any information about it. But just as a follow up to the last video that I did about the 737 MAX 8 and therefore by extension the MAX 9 as well, at the time it was just a day after the most recent incident that had happened with the Ethiopian Airlines crash. And again, both of the incidents that happened and the loss of life is just horrible. And I hate to hear anything, anytime something like this happens. We're still waiting on information about the probable cause of this most recent incident. We don't know if the two may be related in any way. With the previous incident with Lion Air, just keeping it in the simplest terms of generalities, basically there was a function on the airplane that would keep the airplane from going into too much of a critical angle of attack. And if the airplane sensed that that was happening, it would push the nose down to keep it from stalling. In that situation, that was malfunctioning. The airplane thought that it was going into a stall and forced the nose down. The pilots were fighting back against the controls, but they weren't able to overcome that, and that's what led to the crash. Since then, Boeing has said that they were going to release patches for that software so that that wouldn't be an issue anymore. They also released information on how to override that in the event that it did happen again. With the situation within the Ethiopian Airlines, we don't know if that is what happened. We're still waiting on reports from the investigators. But it's interesting that as of yesterday, the United States became the last major country to go ahead and ground the MAX 8 and the MAX 9s as well. I had listened to an interview a couple of days ago with one of the previous managing directors of the NTSB, and this was before Canada and then the United States had gone ahead and grounded the airplane. And he was saying that, initially he didn't have any concerns about the airworthiness of the airplane, but that when England and Germany decided to go ahead and ground it, he said that's when his concerns really started being piqued, because he had worked with them in the past, and he said, they don't make decisions like this based on emotion. There has to be data behind it, and eventually, obviously, you get to the point where no matter what the numbers say, you want to have an abundance of caution. People's lives are at stake, so you want to make the right decisions, and better safe to put the planes on the ground and figure out what's going on rather than potentially put people in harm's way. In my previous video, I spent quite a bit of time talking about how I believe aviation to be very safe, and I completely stand by that. I still feel that way. I have no fears about going flying, although at the same time, too, I will admit I would be reluctant to get on a MAX 8. Obviously, that's a non-issue right now, seeing as that they've all been grounded, but even a couple of days ago, before it had happened in this country, I would have been very hesitant to do that. It's going to be difficult on a lot of the airlines, because a lot of the airlines have used quite a bit of these. Some of the major carriers, I think the two major carriers in the United States that fly the MAX 8 and the MAX 9 are American Airlines and Southwest Airlines. And American Airlines already had an incident last week where some contract companies had done some maintenance on the interiors of the airplane. Nothing structural, nothing airframe, just the interior components, but they had not done it properly, and some of the interiors were coming apart, and so they had to ground 14 of their 737s, and then you add in on top of that grounding all of their MAX 8s and I don't know if they have any MAX 9s or not, but grounding all of their MAX 8s at least. That led to them losing 38 airplanes overnight, and that's going to be very difficult to manage. Southwest also has 34 MAX 8s, so that's going to put a large dent in their fleet as well. But again, safety is number one. Safety is the priority. It's interesting to me too that if any of these incidents do continue to be about these automated overrides, the basically the airplane taking control, it kind of brings it all back to that Boeing versus Airbus camp, where people who are fans of Airbus, for instance, like them because they rely so heavily on data and computers, and the airplane will not allow itself to be flown outside of its envelope. But then people in the Boeing side of thought say, well, no, the final say should be given to the pilot. The pilot needs to be able to do anything he needs to do to save the lives of the passengers on the airplane. Airbus's thought is the pilot can make mistakes. The airplane will not allow itself to be flown outside of what could possibly damage the airplane. The Boeing side of thought is if you need to destroy the airplane to save the people on the airplane, it should be allowed to be able to do that. But then when you see incidents like this with these computer overrides, it kind of blurs those lines between the two schools of thought and what pilots are able to do, what the pilots have the final say in being able to do. I personally am of the opinion that it should all come down to the pilot. You learn how to fly by the seat of your pants, and you should be able to have control over the airplane. That's where I feel about that. I think that the end result is the reason you have a pilot is so that he can make those final decisions and he can be able to do whatever he sees fit. When, with the pilot, he's considered the pilot in command. He makes the final decision, the final say on absolutely anything that needs to happen. It rests squarely on his shoulders. And if the pilot needs to, perform some sort of maneuver with the airplane that's going to just destroy the airplane, but he's doing it for, to save the people on the airplane, that needs to happen. Anyway, I'm interested to see what your thoughts are on this. I know this is still an ongoing development, and as the facts continue to come out, everything may completely change. It may go in an entirely different direction, but but I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on it. How do you feel about the Max 8 and the Max 9? How do you feel about automation versus pilot being exclusively in control of things? Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on this, and we'll continue this discussion, and we'll branch this discussion into other topics as well. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel substantially, and if you click on the little bell, then you'll get notifications whenever we put up new videos. It really means a lot. It really helps things tremendously, and if you enjoy what you see, please subscribe and please tell your friends about it. And we just like to discuss things that are going on in the aviation world, and sometimes we talk about more serious subjects, and sometimes we just have some fun. But I appreciate you watching, and I'll be back again soon.